Hi there, I'm Nola Kane, and today I'm going to read to you an excerpt from my thesis, Revenge of the Mood Outcasts. To give you a bit of an idea of the background of the story, Revenge of the Mood Outcasts is about a group of 20-somethings in an indie rock band who've been trying to score a record deal for the majority of their young adulthood so far. Of course, in the music industry, that is much easier said than done. But just as they're about to finally come up on achieving this goal, they find out through a series of strange events that not only are they magical, but the source of their magic is their music itself. So they have to learn how to control their magic every night that they go out to perform, while also navigating the unknowns of both the music industry and the magical world. The excerpt that I've chosen today takes place when they are trying to film their first music video, and it's told from the perspective of Wes, the drummer. The water is surprisingly comfortable for October. It's not summer warm, but it's not icy. As I watch Tom and Jace dive through the waves, I hold back, tapping the bottom of the ocean floor with my feet, trying to decide if I'm ready to take the plunge. The sensation reminds me of hitting my bass drum, which gives me an idea. I don't know if I expect it to go anywhere, but I tap out the drum line to caution to the wind. Or at least I do it as best I can with just my feet and not my arms doing the main bit. I focus on my thoughts, just like Gladys taught us, my intention. I don't quite know what I want, but something will be nice. I try to send my thoughts out to the ocean like little ripples. Give us something good. Family of dolphins playing together, maybe even bobbing over to us, or a reclusive group of mermaids, or a big wave I can body surf, anything. I focus on that last one, remembering how powerful I would feel as a kid gliding on the surface of the ocean, guided by the rolling of the sea. I can see it now, me riding the wave, soaring like I haven't soared in years, like I've never soared before. The ocean must have heard my call, because moments later, something begins to surface at the horizon, as though the line of sea meeting the sky itself is rising. I keep tapping, centering my gaze on it, imploring it to come my way. My feet come away from the ocean floor, and I steady myself with my arms, paddling toward the wave. I pivot my body toward the shore, putting my arms out in a triangle in front of me. The wave bubbles behind me, rolling me toward the shore just like when I was a wetsuited 12-year-old. I don't quite know what I'm doing, but somehow I manage to pull myself up from my horizontal position until I'm unfolding my knees into a surfer position on top of the wave, the water the only thing supporting my stance. Somewhere below me are the others, and I catch bits of their conversation as I ride the wave. Tom is saying something about no one being tall enough to get a good shot. But then I hear Nat's voice loud and clear, "Get me ready." When I look down, she's crouched, holding the camera well over her head. Now, Jace and Tom are, of course, bickering over who's taller. Jace all but ready to go back-to-back to prove he's tallest. My concentration is wavering, and I try to tune them out before their squabbling hurts the spell, until Nat cuts through again, shouting, "Just one of you do it, it's not marriage!" In one smooth motion, Jace gets into a crouch, rushes, again slowly on account of being in thigh-high water, and lowers his head so Nat can hop onto his back. Their bodies swing in my direction, the camera up to her eye, her thin fingers clenched around its plastic body. It feels as though I'm at the apex of the wave now, and I can feel the water under my feet, spiraling and spitting out, lifting me up. Every droplet sparkles so clear, like glass beads spitting out of a geyser, the little bit of sun beaming through the clouds and reflecting off of it, making them shine like broken fractals of a rainbow. It's so beautiful. I'm going higher, as though I'm flying, and I can't help it. It's as though the sun, the water, the sand is commanding me to let out a woo! Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel, and I am a soon-to-be graduate of Arcadia University's MFA program in creative writing. Today I'm going to read a few pages from my novel. It is a 77,000 word YA novel titled The Crown Point Murders. It has two main characters, two teenagers from Crown Point. The story begins in Charlotte's point of view as she visits her best friend Luke, who'd just been in an accident. He is unresponsive and unconscious, and things are not looking good for her best friend. She wants to figure out what happened to him, and she bumps into Chase online. Chase hosts a true crime podcast, and he is a Crown Point local, and the pair embark on quite the journey to figure out not only what happened to Luke, but what is really going on in Crown Point. I'm going to read a few pages from my novel to you, and we are going to begin with Charlotte first meeting Chase. Prior to this scene, they meet for the first time at a local Starbucks and talk about Luke's accident. Chase tells her to get in the car and let's go somewhere. And this is what happens. This excerpt is in Chase's point of view. The story begins in Charlotte's, and the chapters then alternate on and off between Charlotte and Chase. So this is in Chase's point of view. I park at the visitor center. Charlotte jumps out immediately, and it's the first time I've ever seen her excited about anything. I follow behind her. I love this bridge, she says and clasps her hands together. My dad and I used to walk across it almost every night in the summer. I take a mental note that she said, used to, and smile at her. That's awesome. I had my first heartbreak on this bridge. Charlotte laughs out loud. It's a hearty laugh that splits her face, making her entire body glow. I stare at her for a moment, the warm breeze blowing strands across her face. She's beautiful and free-spirited when she isn't so focused on being so sad. I wonder what she was like before. I'm serious, I say. My smile grows wider as she continues to laugh. I tried to bring her to 2 places at once. What's wrong with that? Charlotte bends over and tries to compose herself. She flips her blonde hair around and ruffles it up, giving it more volume, and runs her fingers through it. You are so unoriginal, she says and twists it into a knot on the top of her head. She secures it without a hair tie, and I wonder how she does that. Just because Nicholas Sparks did it doesn't mean you should. And everyone does that on that bridge. You should have done something cool, like take her jet skiing out on the lake. I roll my eyes and pretend to be offended. Oh, sorry. I didn't know you were the fun police. For some reason, this makes her smile falter, and I regret opening my big mouth. Fun and wild Charlotte was nice. I used to be fun, she says, and hugs herself. Sweat is pooling at the small of my back as we trek up the bridge to the middle. I can see this walk is no big deal for Charlotte, but I stopped running with Scott after we graduated, so my lungs are screaming with each step. Charlotte walks with ease. The muscles in her tanned legs bolt as her flip-flops flap against the concrete. I tear my eyes off of the blue string bracelet she has tied around her ankle. Harley pops into my mind every time I cross this bridge, mainly because I'm only ever on it with Scott, who loves that story, and because it was the first time I ever truly disappointed somebody. I know I shouldn't care now, and really, I don't. But there was something soul-crushing about how Harley looked at me that day. Like she expected so much more out of me than some cheesy date that's been done before. I was only 15, so I didn't know anything about women, and from the look on Charlotte's face after my comment, maybe I still haven't learned. We make it to the middle and I stop abruptly. Charlotte gives me a puzzled look and I smile at her. I want you to scream as loud as you can, I tell her and open my arms up to the lake. Lake Champlain is a massive body of water with the Adirondack Mountains in the background, making it seem like the entire universe is right here in New York. Out on the lake, when you turn the engine off of a jet ski or a boat, the peacefulness of being on the open water is addicting. The mountains make you feel like you won't just float off the face of the earth if you bob around on the water for a little while. I can't do that, she says and looks around. I'll scare people. No, you won't, and who cares? I turn to the water and grip the railing. I lean over it and scream as loud as I can down into the water. My throat starts to burn and beads of sweat drip down my face. I try to see if they splash in the water, but it's impossible and I feel like my organs are going to fall out of my throat. I close my eyes and stop screaming, taking a deep breath and standing up straight. I look at Charlotte, who's staring at me like I just zapped out of the sky, and I shrug. Do it, I say. I lift the hem of my shirt and wipe the sweat off my face. It'll make you feel amazing. I don't think so. Charlotte crosses her arms. I've already picked up on that being her signal that she's over whatever you're doing or saying, so I walk past her in the direction we came from, sticking my hands in my pockets. That is an excerpt from my thesis. I hope to one day get it published, and I hope you all enjoyed that little taste of Charlotte and Chase's world in Crown Point. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tori Bissonette, and I'm going to read a sample of my thesis, Strays Like Us, which is a character-driven contemporary lit novel. Strays Like Us is a story of misfits, and even though it incorporates elements of dark humor and action, it's mainly a story about finding where you belong in this life. It follows protagonist Gia, who is a down-and-out waitress, as she goes on the lam with her small-time criminal boyfriend, Remy, after she's accidentally involved in the death of a high school student. The scene I'm going to read for you today takes place a few days after the initial incident. Gia and Remy have traveled to the house of Remy's childhood friend, Jay, to ask for financial help and advice. They're joined by Luca, a runaway teenager who Gia has taken under her wing after she found him following his failed suicide attempt. In this scene, they've just arrived at Jay's house, there's a house party happening, and they went down to the basement to find Jay. Do you guys want something to drink? Coffee, soda, rum? We're not here for a house call, Jay, Remy said, dropping heavily onto the couch. We need your help. Gia tugged Luca's sleeve and pulled him to sit down next to her. They just about sank to the floor through the ancient cushions, long past their natural lifespan. He began twisting the rings on his fingers. Still holding the water bottle she'd offered to Jay, Gia twisted off the cap and pressed it into Luca's hands, interrupting his restless ministrations. Her own anxiety was high enough without him adding jittery movements to it. So you mentioned. Jay took a seat in the desk chair, spinning it twice before stopping it as he came to face them. What's going on? What's it got to do with this youngster? He gestured at Luca before bringing a hand to rub at his non-existent beard. We need a place to go, somewhere to hole up, and some money if you've got any cash on hand. We're kind of in a tricky situation. I killed someone, Jay. The words leapt out of her, surprising even Gia herself. Still, it was important to be clear. Besides her, Luca fumbled the water bottle, barely managing to avoid upturning the whole thing before setting it down on the floor and wiping out the water that had trickled down his chin. She wanted to offer some kind of apology, perhaps for letting him down, but Luca wouldn't look at her. He kept his gaze forward, making intense eye contact with a "Hang in there, baby" cat poster across from him. It hurt more than she expected. This is what she had to get used to now, the discomfort others would feel around her. Jay whistled, long and low, before shifting forward to rest his elbows on his knees. Well, shit, man, that's big. It was an accident. He came at her with a knife, Remy said, when Gia offered nothing further in her defense. She kept her gaze on her lap, running her fingers over a pulled thread in her jeans. All right, Jay said, shoving to his feet and startling everyone. Gia and Remy both scrambled up as he moved across the room. Luca seemed to be stuck in the couch cushions. Let's go. My parents have a cabin down in Vermont. We can stay there for a while. Lay low. We'll figure the rest out as we go. Grabbing a backpack from under the desk, Jay closed his laptop and shoved it in the bag. Rifling through the papers on his desk, tossing some to the floor and others in the bag, he continued, Did you make a clean break? Is there a chance you've been followed or caught on camera at all? I don't think so, Remy said, eyes flying between Jay's hurricane of packing and Gia's slack-jawed gaze. But Jay, what? We need to get going as soon as possible, Jay said, letting out a muffled curse as he pinched his finger in the backpack zipper. If you've got a head start, then we should take advantage of that. It's only a matter of time before the police are here. We can be in Vermont in 4 or 5 hours tops. Jay, you don't have to come with us, Gia said, pulling her arms across her chest and nibbling at the inside of her lip. The floor seemed to shift under her feet as she struggled to keep up with Jay's momentum. This is my mess. You shouldn't have to uproot your life for me. What kind of life am I even living here? Jay replied, still bent over the bag as he waved his hand at a few grand worth of electronics and high-end decorations. Besides, someone has to show you the way there. Swinging the bag over his shoulder, he stood and gestured them towards the stairs. Come on. Time is money, as my old man always says. Gia couldn't help but glance around the room. The ease with which Jay just left behind heaps of stuff made her feel foolish for the longing she felt for their apartment of worthless crap. Her life wasn't in the stuff, though. She had to remind herself that to keep her feet moving forward towards the stairs. Her life was Remy. As long as she was with him, she had enough. Glancing behind her, she spared a small smile for Luca, who looked as gobsmacked as she felt. Luca was part of her little group now, too, hopefully someone who could be a friend for a while to come. Remy cleared his throat loudly. Standing a few steps above them, he drew himself to his full height as he took Gia's hand in his and waved a finger at Luca. Make sure to keep your hands to yourself. I'm gay, Luca blurted. Congratulations, Remy snapped, already disappearing up the stairs, tugging Gia behind him. It was time to go. That was an excerpt from my thesis, Strays Like Us. Thank you for listening, and I hope you liked it.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Daniels, and I'm here to read an excerpt from my first novel, Writing with a Bandit. This story takes place 2 years after the Civil War and finds our protagonist Emily living with her father in the quiet and respectful high society of San Francisco. However, when she becomes an unwitting pawn in wanted bandit Benjamin Davenport's escape from the city, Emily's quiet life becomes one full with more danger than she could have ever imagined. The excerpt that I'm going to read for you today is from Chapter 2, where Emily comes face to face with the man who kidnapped her for the first time. He stared at her for a moment, her wide eyes meeting his before he burst out laughing, making her flinch back at the sudden sound. "A little spitfire, ain't you, little miss?" he asked, still chuckling. "Stop calling me that," Emily said, surprising herself. But his laughter, bright and uncaring, had loosened a bit of the vice grip that fear had on her heart, enabling her to find her voice for the first time in hours, though it was rough from lack of use. "Well now, what should I call you then?" he asked. She raised her chin a little, determined not to back down or let him see how afraid she was. Her mother had taught her that she should always hold her head high when she was talking to people. Of course, she doubted that her mother had meant for that same etiquette to apply when interacting with the man who had kidnapped her. "My name is Emily Ann Evans," she declared proudly. He stared at her for a moment before he nodded, finally pulling down the neckerchief and revealing the rest of his face, though it was too dark for her to really be able to see what he looked like. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Evans," he said, taking off his hat and inclining his head towards her, almost like a proper gentleman. She waited, but he didn't say anything else. "And you are?" she prompted and watched as he smiled, one side of his mouth curling up. "Now why should I tell you that, Miss Evans?" he asked. Emily felt her jaw tighten. "That way, when you let me go, I'll be able to tell my father whom he should focus on capturing." He chuckled again, clearly not bothered by her threat. "And what is your father going to do?" "He is the sheriff of San Francisco," she said, proud once more, though her voice warbled a touch. "The same sheriff whom you shot," she accused, that warble getting stronger. "That's so," he said, sounding surprised. "Well, damn, guess that means I'll have the whole sheriff's department after me now, doesn't it?" He didn't sound at all concerned, she noted, or even just a bit remorseful, which seemed to stroke her anger. "You shot my father," she threw at him, and he nodded. "I did," he agreed. "Just in the leg, though, just enough to keep him from coming after me. Are there good physicians in that city of yours?" What?" "Good doctors," he repeated evenly. "Do they have those in San Francisco?" Yes," Emily said, bewildered just enough to answer honestly. He nodded. "Then I reckon your father will be just fine, Miss Evans," he told her seriously. "'Cause where I hit him, only way anything would happen would be if he saw an incompetent doctor." You still shot him," she said, unable to understand how that could not affect this man. You shot a man." The bandit smiled again, but there was something sharper in his smile that time. No longer looking gently amused, now he appeared to be a bitterly dangerous man as his teeth glinted in the dark. "I've shot several men, Miss Evans," he told her seriously. "One more won't rest too heavy on my conscience." Thanks for listening, everybody, and remember to check out my novel, Riding with a Bandit.
Hello, I'm Christian Patchell, but everybody just calls me Patch. I'd like to introduce you to Diminished Promise, a Renfield and the Bride story. This is a world where the characters of classic Gothic literature walk the streets of London alongside their authors, but through a skewed lens. As it turns out, some of the authors got it wrong, much to the disappointment of the creatures at the center of their stories. I hope to investigate little pockets inside the larger worlds of Shelley, Stoker, Wells, etc., while paying tribute to these authors and some of their lesser-known characters. Figures that may have been overlooked or even forgotten will be recast as new heroes and villains. Renfield and the Bride, Diminished Promise, is a story about seeking redemption, revenge, closure, and how cycles are doomed to repeat unending, unless there's a course correction or a sacrifice. And oh yeah, I got to make Edgar Allan Poe a vampire. I'm just giddy about that. At this point of the story, we join Renfield and the Bride as their investigation finds them at the Lyceum Theater, in search of Stoker and answers. I read this aloud to my wife's high school art class, and I got the best critique I could ever get, and that was that they thought I would make a really good dungeon master. So here we go. After a thorough search of the entrance, lobby, and hallways surrounding the first floor of the theater, they turned up nothing. The only noises they heard were what they hoped to be Paul exploring the upper boxes. Renfield and the Bride separated and decided to explore the theater itself, entering through opposite doors. The stage of the Lyceum was dark, the luxurious curtains partially open, revealing the beginning of the makeshift set, the laboratory. Preparations for the performance of Presumption were underway. With the lights dim, the setting was more solemn, church-like. The ornate plaster trimmings sitting dormant without the bright lights of the stage and chandelier to give them life. A single wooden chair sat center stage. Spotlight came on, and a man in a mask, entered stage left. The actor's mask was paper mache and covered the top of his face, leaving his mouth exposed. His black suit framing his powder white skin and mask. He walked towards the chair and rested his hand on its back. Both Renfield and the bride stopped their descent down the aisles. The actor addressed the audience, looking out to the back of the Lyceum. "Lady and gentlemen," he started. Renfield winced at the loss of the element of surprise. "Those of us here at the Lyceum would like to greet you with the warmest of welcomes. We would be remiss if we did not warn you of the tale that is about to unfold. The story you are about to witness is a myth of the ultimate in creation made manifest." The actor swept his arms about the stage, motioning to a ghost audience, and for a moment both his sweeping hand and his eyes rested on the bride. A story of the revolution of man, science, and industry, subversive, dark, from the realms of nightmares, and one that begs the question, should we dare? The actor, arms folded behind his back, now locked his gaze upon Renfield for just a heartbeat before continuing. Should we indeed? The convergence of both creation and invention, electricity and surgery, man and monster may horrify and shock you. And of course we hope, entertain, enthrall, and delight. The actor had laughed, and the stage behind him flickered as if lightning had been summoned by his chuckle. The bride looked on, locked in her step, unable to look away. Renfield sniffed and then pressed the jewel on his cane, the dagger tip released. As Shakespeare wrote on the matter, the evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. What evil lies in the animation of the dead? What waking dream may this be? After all, we create our own monsters, do we not? The actor sat in a chair, his back facing the audience. He turned, looked over his shoulder and bellowed, "We all have a similar story, just not writ as large." He paused one last time and then continued. "You have been warned." The lights went dark. The actor and chair disappeared from the stage. That's when they heard the rustling and moaning of a mob. Vampires came from the doors behind them and were beginning to enter from stage right and left. Renfield and the bride were slowly becoming surrounded. The man in the mask was nowhere to be seen. I truly hope you enjoyed this. That was a lot of fun. Thank you, and cheers.
Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Evan Rodenhausen, and I will be reading an excerpt from my book, Nighttime Collectors. The basic premise of this book is three teens go hiking in the woods one summer afternoon and come across a dead body. The body is missing its face. Things spiral from there. The police get involved, namely two characters, one Sheriff O'Donnell and the other Deputy Elliot Castillo, who becomes one of the central characters. And the kids find themselves continually sucked in to the mayhem as it unfolds, chief among them being a young girl named Theo. Bodies continue to pile up, all of them missing specific pieces, legs, arms, teeth, all that good stuff. And the town slowly becomes paralyzed in fear, almost going on lockdown as they wait for a mystery that can't be solved to unravel itself before them. The scene I'm going to be reading tonight by this lovely fire is a discussion between Deputy Elliot Castillo and the county's forensic dentist, whose name is Lee Hubbard. Lee was a victim of an attack, and the only one so far to survive. The only caveat being that he's had his eyes removed. Lee's in the hospital. Deputy Castillo has come to visit him and interview him. This is an excerpt from that conversation. The hallway was empty. Castillo rubbed his eyes and steeled himself for the conversation. He couldn't imagine ever having one like it before. He imagined he would never have one like it again. The room was dimly lit, a yellow lamp on a bedside table beyond the reach of Lee's arms. He was sitting up in bed, propped up by pillows, his hands folded across his lap. 2 large pressure patches, their corners crossing at the top, were taped over his eye sockets. He was very still. "Who's there?" Castillo shut the door, walked towards the foot of the bed. "Just me. Officer Castillo." "Hi, Elliot," Lee said. His muscles relaxed, but his upright posture seemed very delicate. They were silent then. Castillo was hoping Lee would say anything, make a crack, say something like, "Well, I would say it's nice to see you, but I can't see anything." Anything to cut the tension, but he remained utterly quiet, unmoving. Castillo wondered what he would be thinking, what it was that could be going through his head, but nothing came to mind. "How can I ever work again?" Lee said. "They'll give you a pension, I promise you." "I don't care about the pension." Castillo nodded. "I know." There was a chair in the corner of the room, and he pulled it over to the left side of the bed by the window. He took a seat. They were in the PCU high up in the hospital building. The window looked out over the tops of countless trees, snaking roads, and empty green fields. The bottom half of the sun had dipped below the horizon, and what remained looking out over the landscape was red and smoldering and severe. The sky was a mingled shade of orange and purple, and hazy stars peered through the gloaming like the drowsy eyes of wakening beasts. "Yesterday," Lee said, "I told you I could take that molar back to Rollins' corpse and pop it right in. I could have done that. You could probably still do that right now. Probably for the last time," Lee said. Castillo sighed, bent forward, and ran a hand through his hair. He looked up at Lee, who was staring at the wall above Castillo's head. "How about that supersonic hearing? You get that yet?" "I'm not in the mood." "How's your mom? Was that her out in the hall?" Yeah, she's okay." "Okay then." They returned to their silence. Castillo knew why he had come here. Lee knew why he had come here. Neither believed that Castillo would leave before certain questions were asked and answers were provided. Still, they chipped around at the issue like sculptors with chisels and pitching tools, waiting for the point of all this pointless gesturing to emerge. Castillo asked him about the pain in his eyes, about what he saw, what he felt, what it was like. He could see it was grating on Lee then, so he stopped. He knotted his hands together and twiddled his thumbs. Outside, the dusk had deepened to night. The sun was gone from the sky, with only slender tendrils of orange light wavering along the horizon and then disappearing. "What did you see?" Castillo said then, still looking out the window. "What was the last thing you saw?" Lee took a deep breath. He shuddered all over. "Some doll mask," he said. Castillo nodded, remembering Theo's description of the people she saw during her night in the woods. "It was nonsense," Lee said. "How's that?" "Absolute nonsense. I can't even think about it." "I need you to," Castillo said. Lee opened his hands wide and held his palms up to his face. He turned them back and forth, touched the tips of his fingers to his cheeks. "I want to scratch my eyes so bad," he said. "I want to take the balls of my hands and rub them into my eyes until I see stars. Please, Lee." He put his hands down, curled them into a block, his knuckles between his lips. "You know those apple doll faces? Kind of like that, but harder. I don't know, like it was porcelain maybe, but the faces and features were all sunken, old. How were they wearing masks? Over their heads? No. I don't know if they're masks. I don't know what you would call them. They were in their faces, if that makes sense. Joined with their skin. I could see their skin, and it seemed like the mask was stitched into it. Burned into it? Yeah, I saw dark edges. Like they were burnt. What color was the skin? Pale. White. What else?" Lee paused, and then smiled. He began to laugh softly, his face turned towards the ceiling. "You know, you'll never get this. I hope you never do, at least." First, the man came in. The man who gave that guy the tooth. I think it was him, at least. He didn't give me much of a description, but it seemed like it was him. Tall. really tall, probably like 6'4", 6'5". Long coat that was strange and a hat, like a Stetson hat. He began laughing again, face pointed towards the ceiling, still laughing. Castillo began to feel cold. He didn't like looking at Lee like this. He decided he would look out the window and stare at the trees and the sky and the stars as he spoke. Like he was a goddamn cowboy in Pennsylvania, Lee said between fits of laughter. Oh God. Strange. I couldn't see much of his face, but it was strong. Handsome in a beat-up way. But I'm laughing now. I'm laughing because of those fucking masked things. It was just the man in there, but they started to creep in then. Bit by bit, one by one. Some of them walked in. Only some of them, Castillo said. He was still staring out the window. Some of them crawled in. Some of them blundered in. I think they were all women or something like women. Long hair, bodies all thin and wasted. I can't be sure. Some of them crawled in because they didn't have any legs. Castillo blinked slowly, feeling the heaviness of his eyelids, feeling the beginning poundings of a pulsing headache. One of them only had arms, and it stayed upright and dragged itself in. Its knuckles were gnarled, cut up. Then it fell over on its stomach and started crawling. You know, like those snipers in the war movies? Another one had no arms. It kept losing its balance, tripping over itself. I can't believe this. I know, Lee said. His laugh came back. I know, right? Nuts. It's nuts. There they were, though. You wanted to know the last thing I saw, and that was it. Those freaks. What were they wearing? Big blue coveralls? Is that what they call them? Like the big bodysuits that mechanics or handymen wear. He must have slipped you something. He never touched me. Never came near me. Talked to me and turned off the lights. Talked to you? No, you know what? I didn't tell you the last thing I saw. You want to know the last thing I saw? The final last thing ever? Do you? Castillo was looking at Lee now. Part of him didn't want to know. He told himself it was because he didn't care, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was that in the course of this brief conversation, things had expanded beyond anything he was capable of dealing with. Events had left the realm of plausibility and descended into madness, and to hear more, to know more, would be to give it credence, to justify it and think it true, to admit that what was going on was far beyond his capabilities. But another part of him, a stranger and deeper part of him, still wanted to know, wanted to crack open the door and peek in. That's my excerpt. Thank you for joining me this evening. Once again, my name is Evan Rodenhausen, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch us. Much love.
Hi there, my name is Andrew Bastido, though when I'm writing I usually just use my first initial A. I'm here to talk about and read a small excerpt from my thesis project, also my debut novel called In Their Shadows. It is a work of fantasy, literary fantasy, with overtones of gothic horror. It's about the adventures of Kased. Kased is a beastkin warrior. Beastkin are anthropomorphic wolf folks, one of many anthropomorphic fantastical species that run around the world, including humans. She is the daughter and the granddaughter of great heroes of her people. However, her previous attempt to cement herself as one of these heroes failed, leading to her being branded as a failure and as a coward. However, her father's last expedition didn't end so well. He didn't come home, and the only one who did come home was Kased's secret lover. driven mad by whatever he found beyond the rim. Now she must follow in their shadows, to go to the very place where they made names for themselves, where they became heroes. She goes to try and avenge her father, to lay him to rest, to discover what did this to the man she loves, and to try and prove that she is deserving of her family name and reputation. So join me briefly at the beginning of this story, just a few pages after we start. Now imagine for a moment that there's a funeral pyre without a body, starting to burn low as wind sweeps across an open plain. You hear the mournful voices of the beastkin ringing out across the hills. A wind rippled the long grass of the plain and swept up the sides of Connell's Claim, the ancestral mound along the Mother River, and blew the flame into a great crackling tower. Eyes wet with the cold wind, she turned to the older beastkin. "You don't need to wait for me." The old one frowned, leaning on a walking stick. The creature shuffled forward. "No, but I will anyway." Great Connell, the namesake of the claim itself, was in his later years, bent with age and a life of hard-won victories, yet his huge body still showed memories of its great strength as he moved. The fur around his muzzle and eyes were nearly wet, and his legs had given out on him, but his eyes were still bright, and his ears were quick as any. "I won't leave you alone," Kay said. "Connell," she began. "My dear one," he stopped next to her and put a wide paw on her shoulder. "If you want to be left alone for your sake, I will go. If you want me to go inside for my sake, then let me stay. It's cold and you're old," he grunted as he started lowering himself to the thawing spring earth. "Oh, these bones of mine." Groaning, he sat down heavily next to her. "I know I'm old, which also means I'm wise. Never let it be said that you ordered your old grandsire around, decrepit though I be." She smiled weakly at his obstinance. "You're a stubborn bastard, aren't you?" "Always have been. Why should I stop just because I'm old?" He put his arm around her and offered the shared warmth of his cloak. "You know, dear, you've been handling this like a champion, but you still worry me." "Why's that?" She shuffled her legs to get closer to Connell. "You're always so emotional as a pup. It may not be my place to say so, but you really haven't been—" He paused to search for the right word. "Letting it out. In a day you lost your father and Adric. That kind of thing destroys people. It doesn't just roll off, and you know it. You know it, God help you, if anyone knows you do. There's a time to mourn. It's all right, dear." She swallowed hard, unable to feel what she needed to feel. "Adric's still alive. His body is, but his mind isn't." The old chieftain scratched his pricked-up ears and sighed. "Whatever did that to him, whatever's out in the forest, did much worse than kill him. Poor Eamon was the lucky one." "I don't believe in luck," she answered flatly. "Well, then call to mercy." Silence fell between them as the wind stirred the grass. The air was cold, but that only seemed to help her stay numb. Kased shook her head and ran her fingers through the thick gray fur between her ears. "I hate this place." "The Claim Hill?" "This valley, this whole damn valley," she swore. She rubbed at her amber-colored eyes, trying to work the dry chill of the wind out of them. "I hate it all, how it smells, how it feels, how it changes, how the shadows of the mountains don't always move with the sun." She hung her head, hiding her eyes. "What am I supposed to do? What do I have left here?" I'm afraid to get the answer to that question, you'll need to read the rest of the story. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, my name is May. I am in the Masters of Fine Arts program here at Arcadia University. I am going to read to you a few pages from my thesis and a little bit about myself I'm mostly interested in writing young adult fiction, science fiction, world building, and fantasy. So in my short stories and in my thesis, there are elements of this throughout my piece. I want to read to you a piece called The Touch. This piece is about a young girl going through college. So she is 18 years old, and she discovers within a few days into her college career that she has a gift that she wasn't aware of. And it's the power of shield to protect herself and anybody that she comes in contact with, and she learns a lot about herself throughout this journey. And she also becomes a good friend to this one girl who is also a roommate and who is also a college student herself. And how I put it in the novel is they become frenemies over time. Her name is Sam, and she discovers that she also has a gift. And the scene that I'm going to read is when she comes into realization about her gift as well. Sam. Where are we? Sam asks, looking confused. We're somewhere. I know this place. It's a long story. Why am I not surprised that you know this place? Said Sam as Dan walked out from behind the shadows. Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, you have no right just kidnapping us. I didn't kidnap you, she said. Yes, you did. My name is Dan, he introduced himself. He then proceeded to walk towards Sam, who was walking back. She was in the process of full transformation, but her normal human pigment began showing again. It started around her eyes, then slowly onto her arms and neck. Each and every vein was popping the color of greenish blue. It was like watching a flower bloom. Whoa. What happened to me after, Liz? Let me answer that question for you, Sam, Dan interrupted. No offense, but I don't know you. I want to know from my friend. Liz, what's happening to me? Sam looked and didn't want to trust him. You have to trust him, said Liz. Sam gave Dan a stare of staring into his soul. Something caught on Dan's neck. Ouch, he yelped. Make her stop, Dan pleaded to Liz. Stop what? Dan, talk to me, please. Make her stop. I can't stand it. He was on the floor now, shaking like a leaf, like he was having a seizure. His eyes were rolled back. Only his pupils were the only ones that showed. Sam looked. Liz looked for something. She found a small red umbrella around her. She had to put Dan out of his misery and let Sam concentrate on her. Hey, Sam yelled. Don't poke me, that hurts. Sorry, Sam, I didn't know what else to do. You were hurting him. What you just did there was dark magic, Dan said as he slowly placed his arms as if he was hurt on his ribs. I don't know who or what you know, but that was dark magic. What do you mean dark magic? Sam asked. Liz chimed in. Hello, anyone care to tell me what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Your friend here, she's a witch.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherry Hall, and today I'm going to read for you a brief excerpt from my young adult novel titled The Leahy's Flower. This novel is my first foray into the fantasy genre, and I was a little nervous as I continued through the writing process of this book, but I was driven to write this story when the idea of a young girl who lived on the edge of a magical forest popped into my head. I've always wanted to write a story with a young and courageous but flawed heroine, and Anna, the main character in The Leahy's Flower, fit that bill perfectly. The magical setting and world building with the forest and the creatures that live within it were all just a bonus for me. This excerpt that I'm going to read for you is from chapter 1 of The Leahy's Flower, and our young heroine Anna is attending a bonfire gathering in her village, accompanied by her best friend Martha and some of her peers. While Anna is attempting to have fun, she is consumed by thoughts of her mother's illness, which has gotten progressively worse, and the healers in her village have been unable to cure. At the bonfire, Anna spots Maisel, the oldest woman in her village, whom some suspect of witchcraft. Anna decides to approach Maisel, despite what everyone says about her, and they strike up a conversation, which ultimately leads Anna towards a path of hope in her most desperate hour, a path that she pursues throughout the novel. It wasn't long before she spotted Maisel, the oldest woman in their village, sitting hunched over on a log by the fire. No one really ever paid Maisel any mind, and some even stayed as far away as they could, since there were people in the village who believed that Maisel was a witch who'd put a curse on them if they got a little bit too close. Anna herself didn't believe in such fanciful gossip. She approached Maisel, who didn't look up until Anna cleared her throat. "Good evening, Maisel." Maisel blinked up at her before once again casting her gaze back to the fire, and Anna could see the reflection of the flames in her near black eyes. "My child, it has been a long while since I've seen you in the village." Anna moved to sit down next to her. "Yes, I know. Mama has been ill, so I've had to stay home and help Penelope look after my brothers." Such a shame. You're the only one worth talking to in this blasted place." Anna was strangely touched. "Thank you." They sat in companionable silence before Anna heard Maisel begin muttering to herself. "Shouldn't tell her. Too dangerous. Yes, too dangerous. What's that, Maisel? What, child? What's too dangerous to tell me?" Maisel let her gaze fall to the fire again before they flicked back to Anna's face in an appraising way. "I guess you are old enough to make your own choice." "Choice about what?" "The choice to save your mother from her peril." "Save her? How? Even the doctor has lost most hope for Mama's recovery." "I've heard things. There might be a way to save her yet, but you'll need to go on a trip into the forest." "The forest? But Papa and Mama said that we shouldn't go there. They say it's too dangerous." "I think you're old enough to take care of yourself and not lose your sense. Besides, I doubt there's much time to lose. I sense your mother's condition is dire." Anna straightened her shoulders a bit at the compliment and did her best to look mature and responsible. She was, after all, only 2 years younger than Penelope, who just turned 16 last month, and she was mature for her age. "Yes, it is. You can trust me. I'm not a little girl anymore." "No, I know you're not. That's why I'm trusting you with this very secret. I've told no one else about it, and no one here but me is old enough to remember. There are the perks to being the village shrew." "A secret?" "Yes. So secret you can't tell your sister or your brothers, not even your mama. It is essential that only you know what I'm about to tell you." Anna leaned forward eagerly. "Yes, Maisel, I understand." "Good. Now, I need you to listen very carefully. You have to follow all of these instructions perfectly in order for it to work, exactly as I say. Do you understand?" Anna nodded her head but said nothing. "You can get something from the forest, something that can make your mother better." "Really? What is it?" "It's called a Leahy's flower. There's only one in the entire world, and it's hidden deep inside the forest. The flower's powers are said to be so strong that it can heal any ailment or illness." "How? Is it magic?" "It's said the flower has so much power because it was enchanted by a witch many centuries ago. She cast a spell on the flower in a desperate attempt to save her lover's life. It still grows in an ancient part of the forest where the spell was originally cast." "But Maisel, I've never heard about the flower before. How do you even know that it exists? Have you seen it?" "No, I've never seen the flower with my own eyes. Many that have been told of its existence before thought the flower was an old myth, and the flower doesn't actually exist. That's why it must be kept secret. If people believed that the flower was real, they wouldn't rest until it was found. The knowledge of its existence could mean war." Thank you so much for listening to this brief excerpt of my novel, The Leahy's Flower. I hope you enjoyed it.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Edmonds, and today I'm going to read for you a brief excerpt from my young adult fantasy novel of Blood and Poppies. As a writer, I really love playing around with the traditional fantasy genre by making it more inclusive and really turning tropes on their head. Of Blood and Poppies came about when I started considering this idea of what happens after the big battle. What do people do when they're left after the dust settles and they're just trying to live their lives as peacefully as they can? This excerpt I'm going to read for you is a scene of our protagonist, Santo, who is not human. He has the ability to kind of steal energy from any living being around him, as he's practicing controlling his powers with his first ever human friend, Rostin. I really hope you enjoy it. Santo focused on the shivering plants as he imagined a thin membrane-like layer coming over his skin. It was less like the firm, impassable wall that he had tried to picture before, and more like the flexible leather of a glove that was both strong and sure. He took one step forward, then another. Though he didn't look up, Santo could see Rostin's legs and his shoes behind the stocky green plants. Another step forward. He could see Rostin's shadow darkening the few snowy white flowers to a deep gray. 4 steps forward. Santo was nearing the point at which his earlier attempts had failed, but he continued, one small step after another. With Rostin standing just a few feet in front of him, Santo told himself over and over again that the barrier would hold, that it had to hold. It had to. Hey! Rostin's voice cut through Santo's concentration. His head snapped up, expecting something to have gone wrong, but he found himself face to face with Rostin's smile. They were standing less than an arm's length away, and when he glanced down, Santo realized that his shoes were nearly brushing the first leaves of the Myoporum. It was the closest he had gotten to the plants all day. Told you. Rostin grinned wider, holding up one of the few Myoporum flowers in the small space between them. Okay, you were right. Santo couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and surprise at the sudden success. However, when he took the delicate flower from Rostin, it wilted in his hand. Santo stepped back, shrugging to brush off the slight disappointment. Mostly, at least. We'll just have to try again then, huh? Rostin elbowed him slightly, the jostling knocking the dead flower from Santo's hand. Same time tomorrow? Sure, Santo nodded, picking up the discarded basket and joining Rostin along the path towards town. I'd like that. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this brief excerpt from Of Blood and Poppies. I truly hope you enjoyed it.